Welcome back to Mental Mike's Recovery Radio, where recovery meets discovery. I am Mental Mike, and this is episode 19. I want to start with something simple this week, something I need you to truly hear before we go any further. The goal of this work is not to sand off your rough edges. It is not to become some perfect, polished version of yourself. The goal is to become whole. That distinction matters more than almost anything else I can offer you in this program. Week 19 of the Unified Flux model is a pivotal chapter in your recovery journey, because this is where we turn inward with a real map, a framework for understanding the architecture of your own mind, the parts of you that are visible, the parts that have been buried, and the parts that connect you to something far larger than your personal story. We look at the shadow this week, and I want to be clear about what that means. The shadow is not some dark monster lurking inside you. It is simply every part of yourself you were taught at some point was unacceptable. Your anger, your fear, your vulnerability, even your power. Pushed away, not because something was wrong with you, but because you were trying to stay safe and loved. Suppressing those parts takes constant, exhausting energy, like holding a beach ball underwater. And eventually, that energy has to go somewhere. It shows up as craving, as compulsion, as self-sabotage. This week, we also look at archetypes, those universal patterns of human experience that remind us that your struggle is not an isolated personal failure. It is a timeless human journey, one that connects you to every person who has ever walked this road. And we walk toward what the UFM calls individuation, the courageous, lifelong process of becoming who you were always meant to be. Not fixed, not finished, always becoming. And today, I am honored to introduce you to Marcus R. Marcus R. knows what it means to carry parts of himself in hiding for a long time, to push down what felt too heavy, too shameful, too complicated to face. And what his journey revealed through this work, through the willingness to finally turn inward with honesty and compassion, is that those buried parts were never his enemy. They were fragments of his wholeness, waiting to be welcomed home. His story maps directly onto the heart of what this week of the UFM is asking you to consider. That real recovery is not about cutting away the parts of yourself you do not like. It is about bringing all of them into a conscious and compassionate relationship. So settle in, be gentle with yourself today, and let's go deeper together.
Welcome back. You've been doing some really incredible work building this foundation of strength and awareness. Today, we're going to take another step on that path. It's a courageous journey inward, and honestly, it's a pivotal discussion for your recovery. You are absolutely ready for this.
And this quote, well, it really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. See, this isn't about trying to sand off your rough edges or become some perfect version of yourself. No way. This is about integration. It's about gathering up all the pieces of you and becoming whole.
All right, so let's get into this important discussion. Here's the path we're going to walk together. First, we'll talk about why this conversation is such a turning point. Then, we'll actually map out your inner world, kind of like a GPS for your psyche. That map will help us as we go to meet the parts of yourself that maybe you've had to hide away. From there, you'll see how your own personal story connects to these huge universal patterns. And finally, we'll pull it all together to light up that path toward real, lasting wholeness.
So yeah, this isn't just another lesson. I want you to think of this week as the next really crucial chapter in your own heroic story of recovery. It's a real turning point.
And I'm going to say it again because it's so important. You are ready for this. Every bit of strength and awareness you've built up to now has prepared you for this moment. As the Unified Flux model, or the UFM, teaches us, this isn't just some mental exercise. It's about releasing actual trapped bioelectric energy and finding a kind of freedom that you can truly feel.
Now, before you go on any big journey, it helps to have a map, right? Well, for this inner journey, we're going to use a framework we call Mental Mike. Think of it as a clear, simple way to understand the architecture of your own mind. So, first up is the conscious ego. That's the part of you that's listening to me right now. It's the I that makes plans, goes to work, and figures out what's for dinner. It's like the captain of your ship,
absolutely essential, but it's not the whole ship. Now, right below that conscious deck is what we call the personal unconscious. This is where we've stored all the stuff, the memories, the feelings that were maybe too painful or too shameful to deal with at the time. And according to the unified flux model, this is exactly where that bioelectric energy gets trapped, creating the blocks that fuel our addictive patterns.
And then we go even deeper, down to the collective unconscious. And this is just a mind-blowing concept. It's this shared pool of human experience, of patterns and potentials that connects every single one of us across all of time. It means your personal struggles are part of a much, much bigger human story.
Okay, so now that we have our map, we can start the most important part of the journey. We can start to turn towards and compassionately meet those parts of ourselves we were taught to hide. So let's have a discussion about the shadow. Now, the very first thing you need to know is this. The shadow is not some evil monster living inside you. It's not. It's just the collection of all the parts of you that, at some point, you learned were unacceptable. Maybe it was your anger, your fear, your vulnerability, even your power. You just learned you had to push it away. This right here, this analogy from the Mental Mike framework is just perfect. Trying to suppress parts of yourself is exactly like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You know what that feels like, right? It takes constant, exhausting effort. And eventually that ball is going to pop up somewhere else, usually as a craving, a compulsion, or self-sabotage.
And how did this even happen? Well, it's a story as old as time, and it usually starts when we're little kids. It's as simple as this. You expressed a totally normal feeling, like anger or big sadness. Someone told you with words or just a look that it was not okay. So what did you do? You learned to hide it away to stay safe and loved. This isn't a character flaw. It's a survival strategy. So, where can you spot this shadow in your life today? Well, it shows up when we have those really intense, over-the-top reactions to other people. That's called projection. It's the engine behind our compulsive and addictive behaviors. It's the voice of self-sabotage, and it often tries to talk to us in our dreams. Just noticing these clues is a huge first step.
All right, now let's build on this. We're going to zoom out a little bit from our personal shadow and look at these collective patterns that live inside all of us. They're called archetypes, and wow, understanding them can give our personal struggles a much deeper and more powerful meaning.
You see, the UFM doesn't see archetypes as just labels. It sees them as universal energy patterns that shape our lives. You know them, right? The addict, the wounded healer, the hero. These are powerful currents of energy that we can either get swept away by or learn to work with.
I really want you to take a breath and let this one sink in. Please, your struggle with addiction, it is not some isolated personal failure. You are living out a timeless human theme. You're on a heroic journey that connects you to millions of others throughout history. That reframe can change everything.
But here is the key, okay? This is the crucial difference. The trap is when we identify with an archetype. When you truly believe, I am the addict, or I am the victim. The power, on the other hand, comes from learning to work with that energy. You can draw on its strength and its wisdom without letting it swallow your whole identity.
And all of this, it brings us to the ultimate destination of this whole inner journey. And guess what? The goal isn't perfection. It's not about being flawless. It's about being whole. And there's a name for this journey. It's called individuation.
So what is individuation? It's simply the courageous, lifelong process of becoming who you were always meant to be. It's about integrating all these different parts we've been talking about, the ego, the shadow, the archetypes, into one unified, authentic you. Honestly, it's the very definition of recovery. And you can kind of see this journey mapped out across a whole life. The first part of life is usually about building our ego, finding our place in the world. And then, for so many of us, a crisis hits. Addiction brings it all crashing down. But that collapse, it's not the end. It's the heroic turning point that kicks off the real work of life, the journey inward toward wholeness.
And the unified flux model brings this right back to our bodies, to our energy. See, individuation isn't just a cool psychological idea. It's the very real, physical process of restoring that bioelectric coherence in your system. It's about taking down all the internal dams so your life force, your spirit, can finally flow the way it was meant to.
So let me just say this one more time, because if you hear nothing else today, hear this. The goal is not to perform surgery on your soul and cut out the parts you don't like. The goal is to bring all of them into a conscious, compassionate relationship. That is what frees your energy. That is what leads to real, lasting recovery.
Always remember this. Recovery is not some finish line you cross and then you're fixed. You're not trying to reach some static state of perfection. You are an active participant in a beautiful, messy, creative, and dynamic process of always becoming more and more yourself.
And so I'm going to leave you with this question to carry with you this week. Just think about that one part of yourself, the part you've pushed away the hardest, the one you've judged the most. What would it mean, just for a moment, to start to welcome that part of yourself back home?
This podcast explains something I've felt my entire life, but never had words for. The exhaustion of pretending. That's really what addiction became for me. A way to keep performing a version of myself that looked successful while everything underneath was collapsing quietly. The episode talked about the conscious ego being like the captain of a ship. That hit me immediately because my ego was obsessed with control, success, image, productivity, winning. As long as I looked composed, I thought I could outrun whatever was happening underneath me emotionally. But underneath that conscious version of myself was chaos I refused to acknowledge. Grief, fear, anger, loneliness, all of it shoved underground. The podcast described the unconscious like trapped bioelectric energy. That honestly made more sense to me than any recovery language I'd heard before. Because suppressed emotions don't disappear. You feel them leaking out sideways, through cravings, through rage, through anxiety, through self-destruction, and for me, through alcohol and cocaine. That beach ball analogy wrecked me too. Trying to hold your shadow underwater. That's exactly what addiction felt like. Exhausting. Every day trying to suppress emotions I didn't know how to process safely. And eventually, the pressure became too much. The part about the shadow not being evil changed something in me though. Because honestly, I've spent years treating parts of myself like enemies, especially vulnerability. Where I grew up, vulnerability got punished fast. So I learned to become polished instead. Controlled, successful, emotionally unreadable. That became my persona. And the podcast made me realize something painful. The stronger the mask became, the more disconnected I became from myself underneath it. That realization hurt, but it also explained why achievement never fixed the emptiness. You can't heal disconnection by performing harder. The projection section got uncomfortable immediately too, because I've always judged emotionally needy people harshly. And people who openly cry, people who need reassurance, people who admit they're struggling. And listening to this podcast, I realized I hated those qualities because I buried them inside myself years ago. Yeah, that hit hard. The addiction wasn't just numbing pain. It was protecting the identity I built around never appearing weak. That's exhausting psychologically. The Archetypes section really stayed with me too, especially the wounded healer idea, because for years, I thought my addiction history permanently disqualified me from being respected. Now I'm starting to wonder if surviving this actually gave me a deeper understanding of people than success ever did. That changes how I see recovery completely. Not as punishment, not as damage control, as transformation. And honestly, the individuation part might have impacted me most. The idea that recovery isn't about becoming perfect. It's about becoming whole. That sentence felt like somebody finally translated my internal experience into words, because perfectionism nearly killed me. Trying to appear flawless while silently falling apart emotionally. Now I'm learning something different. Wholeness means all parts of me get acknowledged. the strong parts, the ashamed parts, the grieving parts, the hopeful parts. None of them need to be exiled anymore. That idea feels strangely peaceful for the first time in my life. I'm beginning to understand recovery might not be about erasing who I was. It might be about finally having the courage to stop hiding from myself. And honestly, that feels more freeing than any drug ever did.
If something in this conversation stood out to you, don't ignore that. That's usually where the work begins. Recovery isn't about trying harder. It's about understanding what's actually happening and learning how to respond differently over time. If you're ready to take the next step, you can find resources, guidance, and support at soulrecoveryhub.com. Take what you heard today, sit with it, and keep moving forward. Copyright 2026, Mental Mike, all rights reserved.